So anyways, guys, a couple of years ago, Lian Li, they saw what Phanteks was doing with the T30, and they basically said, look, we can do T30 performance, but in a much easier to live with package and something that's a lot more adaptable. So what they came out with this year, after years of development, is the Lian Li Uni Fan P28. Now I know a lot of you are thinking like Uni Fan, it's right away associated with RGB. This fan actually has RGB, but in a very unique way. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But what they did is that they launched a 28mm thick high performance fan that competes technically with the T30, is cheaper, but is it actually better than the T30? Well, yes it is, but no it isn't. I just wanted to address everything about this fan in this video right after a message from our sponsor. Looking for something different from your CPU cooler? Meet Deepcool's new AK Digital series that add a retro style digital display showing CPU usage and temperature in a straightforward but completely unique and tasteful way. With these, you get one of the most unique air cooling experiences around. The new Deepcool AK400, AK500, and AK620 digital coolers. Performance and innovation combined into awesome looking coolers for every situation. Find them at the links below. Alright, so kicking things off, the first thing I wanted to talk about here is a common misconception about the P28. Because even though it is 28mm thick on the frame side, the actual mounting holes themselves, thank you very much Lian Li, take standard length mounting screws. And that's very important because it's something the T30 doesn't do. I mean, yes, Phanteks does give you custom length mounting screws for radiators and whatnot, but this will use your bog standard mounting hardware. And they've actually done that by recessing those mounting holes by about 3mm. Anyways, from the outside, the P28 doesn't look all that special other than a semi-transparent Lian Li sticker that shows off the bearing and a subtle polished aluminum design on the two sides. If you don't like it though, you can just yank it off. One of the bigger highlights here though is the use of LCP or liquid crystal polymer for the blades, which is supposed to give it more stability over time, and in turn that allowed Lian Li to have a tiny 0.6mm gap between the frame and the blades. Technically, this smaller gap also leads to more performance, but if you look at it next to Noctua's A12x25, which is spec'd at 0.5mm, it seems to have an even tighter clearance, which is pretty ambitious. Of course, since the P28 is part of Lian Li's Uni Fan ecosystem, you can also pull something like this off. So mount multiple fans together without that crazy cable mess that sometimes comes with high performance fans. And look, there's been plenty of other manufacturers that have tried to pull this off with varying degrees of success or complete disaster. But in the end, this original system is probably one of the best. All you have to do is take a couple of fans together, you find the tabs, push them together, and basically it's done. What you can do is you can go for up to 6 fans, one right after another, off of one single header. And that header sort of plugs in to the end of your fan, like so. You just plug this into the PWM header of your motherboard, and boom, you're off to the races. But there's also a cost for all of this, to the tune of $26 per fan for the white or black versions if you buy them individually. Compared to the immediate competition, it's actually not too bad, since so many of these advanced fans these days, with the exception of the P12 Max, tend to put you back $30 or more. Add Lian Li's 6-year warranty to this, and there's definitely some value here if you're looking for a high-end fan. The P28 also comes in 2 flavors depending on what you're looking for. There's the $26 single package that comes with a single 4-pin PWM fan adapter and a $75 triple fan box that comes with a few more goodies. There's a handy extension cable, 3 individual 4-pin adapters, and an inline fan speed controller that puts a cap on the maximum fan speed. Low maxes out at 1300 RPM, medium hits 2200, and high goes up to the fan's maximum peak of 2600 RPM. Now the P28, it actually has one more little trick up its sleeve. Check this out. If you want to, you can buy an optional RGB strip for this thing. Now for a triple pack for this, it costs $20 US, which isn't actually that bad because you get the best of both worlds, right? You get a super high performance fan along with what I think looks like absolutely beautiful, not totally in your face, like the Fan Hub RGB lighting. The only thing that you have to take into account is that yes, it does add another cable to the Uni Fan system, so not everything is coming out of that one unified connector. The nice thing about this cable though is that it can either connect to Lian Li's L-Connect software through their hub, or it has a 5-volt ARGB header for your motherboard. That to me gives a best of both worlds. Now to connect this thing together is pretty straightforward. All you have to do is yank off one side of the Uni Fan, replace that cap with one of these RGB caps, and then connect each section together with Lian Li's proprietary connector, and that's it. The only problem I sort of have with this is that it's optional, and it pushes the overall price of 3 fans to just under $100 US. Another interesting thing we noticed while testing these fans is the fact that even though Lian Li claims that their minimum speed is 200 RPM, we use multiple motherboards, multiple pieces of software, and even the fan control software that's available on GitHub. I'm gonna leave a link to that down below because it's an amazing piece of software. Every single one of them had these running at a minimum of 800 RPM. Now that is a huge discrepancy, but supposedly it's the way that Lian Li is handling the PWM signal for this motor. It is very, very challenging for a lot of motherboards and a lot of software to pick up properly. But anyways, with that being said, I want you to take a quick listen to what this P28 sounds like, because there's going to be some concerns in there, guys. So overall, this is a very quiet fan, right? Until you hit that 1800 RPM mark. Right above that, we start to get into an issue. Let's listen to between 1800 and 2000 RPM one more time. So obviously there is a very, very distinct buzzing that enters into the sound profile of the P28 between those 2 points. And for me, that is so disappointing. And it's not only just one sample that we were testing. We never ever do that when we encounter an issue. We always test multiple samples across multiple days, and even a bunch of people listening to it. We tested a dozen different P28s from different batches, and every single one of them had that sort of buzzsaw flavor between 1800 and 2000 RPM, and that is a major problem for Lian Li. Just to give you a perspective about what this means, so from a decibel point of view, if you're going 200 RPM increments, it only increases, this fan only increases about 1 to 1.3 decibels. But in that 200 RPM increment between 1800 and 2000, you're looking at a 2.2 decibel increase. Now, when it comes to sound pressure, that is a massive amount. And what does that do for performance? Well, we're gonna find out, but first I need to mention that our fan testing's undergone a pretty significant update to be more controlled and repeatable. We've also refreshed the radiator we test on to a more modern EKWB AIO 120. All the details are linked in a document in the description below. I hope you guys check it out because it's pretty important to understand how our methodology has changed and how these results will not line up to previous videos. Let's start with raw CFM without any restriction, and the P28 gives absolutely epic performance here, actually beating the T30 right across the board, making it the best fan we've ever tested. It does plateau around the 42 decibel mark, but the numbers are still huge. Unfortunately, while our results are noise focused, what they don't seem to be reflecting is the unpleasant noise the P28 makes above 1800 RPM, and that's something you need to take into account here too. What the P28 also doesn't have is that extra gear that allows fans like the PPC 3000 and T30 to hit 3000 RPM. So when they're compared at full speed, it tends to slip backwards a bit. Normalize that down to a constant 36 decibels and it's obvious this thing excels at delivering amazing amounts of airflow at low noise levels. And you can see here it's running at just under 1600 RPM, which is free and clear of that weird buzzing sound. Thank God. But when we put these fans into a bit more realistic situation by mounting them on a radiator, the situation, it sort of flips itself. The P28 is now in a literal dead heat with the T30 until 41 decibels, and then it starts to lose by a bit. Still, matching the thick boy T30 in its natural habitat, well, that's beyond impressive. Now, if you want to blow your ears out by running your radiator fans at full speed, there are other options that'll give you better overall performance, but I need to point out the P28 is running at just 2600 RPM here, making it the slowest running fan to reach above 40 decibels. So the P28's real strengths live at lower decibel ranges, where it can get performance that almost matches the T30 while costing less money. And yes, you are safely beyond that buzzing noise at that point. Not to mention, it comes with one of the best interfan mounting systems around. Alright, so that covers the synthetic side of things, but let's move on to some real-world temperature testing on an AIO and also on an actual air cooler. Starting with the EK120 and all the fans running at full speed, we're looking at temperatures that pretty much match the Silent Wings Pro 4, but ultimately get beat by the Mobius OC and T30. Switch over to a more decibel normalized test, and this is where certain slower speed fans can really start to shine. I mean, beating the T30 is almost impossible, but the P28 comes very close to matching it, while also narrowly beating out the P12 Max and the legendary Gentle Typhoon. Air cooling, that's another matter altogether, but don't take this to mean the P28 isn't doing well, because look at the decibel readings here. It's actually one of the best relative to the amount of noise it produces, with the only better fan being the Pro 4. Of course, this doesn't take into account the type of noise coming from the fans, which is also important too, and that's sadly where the P28 tends to fail. And with the final test, the P28 is still super competitive with the best of the best fans on the market when it's mounted to an air cooler and running at 36 decibels. I do have to say though, the Pro 4 might not be the best in synthetics, but it's just a beast on the coolers we're using in real world testing. Alright everybody, so we've come to the end of this journey, and the question that everybody I'm sure had at the very beginning is, can the P28 compete with the T30? The answer to that is absolutely, but only in very specific narrow instances. In the vast majority of situations, the T30 will pull ahead. Then again, it's also more expensive, and the Lian Li P28 has that option to add the RGB kits. It's got the Uni Fan approach, so very, very easy cable management. My only issue with the P28, and it's actually going to be why I'm not going to recommend it unfortunately in this video, is the sound profile at certain RPM levels. It's just, in my opinion, it's disgusting. It completely detracts from the overall experience of an otherwise great fan. But if Lian Li can nail that down in maybe upcoming revisions, this will absolutely be a recommendation, but it's not right now. So anyways, I'm Mike with Hardware Canucks. I really hope that you enjoyed this content. If there's any other fans that you want me to look at, put it down in the description below, and you know damn well I'm gonna do it. So anyways, I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Have a great day.